Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Let me get myself live on Instagram. Now that I know how to check to make sure that the sound is working, we're going to be able to get right into it. All right. You guys get to be my test dummies. Those of you guys that are watching on Facebook, listening to the recording, or watching on YouTube. Happy Tuesday, guys. Welcome back to Fit Body Secrets, where my mission is to bring you guys inspiration, motivation, and some tips to help y'all on your fitness and your fat loss journey. And today we're going to be talking about undereating. And even if you are overweight right now and you're like, girl, there is no way that I am undereating, let me encourage you to listen to the entire episode, because undereating is not just subjective to calories alone. There are a lot of things that I want to talk about today that are going to help you understand the long-term impact of undereating, how even different eating patterns and habits are actually making it more difficult for you to obviously lose body fat, but even feel good in your day, regulating your appetite, regulating your energy, making sure that you're sleeping well, making sure that your workouts are productive. So I want you guys to really listen in on all of this stuff. I'm going to be talking a lot about the different signs and symptoms, the things that happen on a metabolic perspective, the different types of undereating, and hopefully get you guys feeling really good about taking a less extreme approach to your nutrition and working in a place that allows you to fuel your body to get to the goals that you have for yourself, rather than continuing to restrict yourselves all the time, because that is truly the only thing that most people know how to do. Most people are really good at going into short-term stints of restriction. I'm going to remove sugar. I'm going to remove this. I'm going to start tracking all of my calories and my macros. And they get into this very fixed mindset of restriction and never understanding what it looks like to actually optimally fuel to look and feel your best. And that is what the goal of today is. So I'm going to just pop over on Instagram. Caitlin, you can definitely ask a question if you want to go ahead and start with that. I would love for you to go ahead and ask a question, and we can start with that before I get into today's topic. We're going to get a little pause in because I do these live. So if you have a question, feel free to pop it up. It's like the Jeopardy game, because she's probably typing, and I'm not going to get into my topic today until I answer a listener's question, because you guys are what matter most, people that are actually watching live. Watch it be some crazy question that I don't know the answer to. And you give it another minute or two. Although a minute seems like it takes forever. How's everybody feeling today while I'm getting started? Can I just tell you that I've had 2 nights of really good sleep? And if you guys know, I talk about my sleep a lot, something I'm always battling, but the last 2 nights have been amazing. So I'm feeling pretty amazing today. Caitlin, this must be a really long question, or maybe you're no longer live. All right, well, Caitlin, if you do come back and have a question to ask me, feel free to pop it in there. But I'm going to go ahead and jump into today's topic. We're going to be talking about undereating. So here we go. Let's talk a little bit about what undereating really actually means. Okay, so I think we're conditioned to believe that undereating is just subjective to calories, right? I know I'm not eating enough calories to reach my goals. We've heard of starvation mode, but your body is not just about calorie intake, or undereating is not just about calorie intake. It's about having low energy available. So undereating is also looking at eating patterns. People that go long periods of time without eating, even fasting and stuff like that, can be signs of undereating that are causing having a negative impact on your energy levels, on your workouts, on your appetite, and stuff like this. So things like chronic dieting. So maybe you can be under eating specific nutrients, which we're going to talk about. Maybe you're somebody that has removed a specific food group from your diet, or you restrict carbohydrates, you restrict sugar. Maybe you skip meals often. Maybe you have very inconsistent eating behavior. So maybe some days you are grazing throughout the day, you're eating a lot, but then other days you're so busy, you're not even thinking about food. Those are all different ways that you can be under eating. Now, the other thing that I really want to emphasize here is that a lot of people also stress about like cheat days and stuff like that, and they'll build those into the plan. And they're like, but I really can't be under eating if I keep having these days where I'm overeating. And truthfully, a lot of times the under eating is what's leading to those behaviors. So that under eating, that is actually a symptom. So I know that you might be thinking, well, I tend to be really good 5 to 6 days of the week, but I know I normally have 1 or 2 days where I refeed, or I have a little bit higher calorie days. those are still cycles of undereating. You are intentionally underfeeding your body energy throughout the week, and then you're compensating by overeating too much on the weekend. We have to think about what the goal of eating is. Eating is a way to nourish your body and get enough nutrients. And a lot of that is normal function on a daily basis. So even this pattern, while you might be getting enough calories consistently, if you're looking at those high calorie days versus the low calorie days, it doesn't mean that you're getting enough energy when your body needs it. And this is where we can talk about different adaptations, which is part 2, what I'm going to be talking about today, is what are some of the things that happen when we are chronically undereating. Okay. All right. So a lot of people that I know in my circle, I should say a lot of the clients that I work with, come to me with things like problems with appetite regulation. Maybe they've been diagnosed with an underactive thyroid. Maybe they suspect that they have high cortisol. Maybe their cycle is irregular. Maybe they're having other signs that maybe their sex hormones are out of whack. This is all signs that your body is fighting you. Your body is fighting you. And often these are all signs of undereating. And when you are undereating, all of these things go haywire. It's why women that, or not even just women, but people that deal with eating disorders do deal with a lot of the hormonal and metabolic adaptations that happen from chronically being underfed. So it's really important to understand that undereating does cause does have a negative impact on all of these things. And a lot of times it doesn't happen overnight. So you doing a short 30 to 60 day diet isn't really going to be that big of a deal in terms of in terms of a hormonal or a metabolic in terms of a long-term hormonal or metabolic impact. But if you're doing those cycles frequently, that does cause some chronic adaptations. And if you're chronically living in a calorie deficit or living with these patterns, you will continue to see negative repercussions from those actions. Let's talk about some signs that you are undereating. And Caitlin, I keep looking over just to see if you do have a question, because I know that you mentioned you had a question and I haven't seen it pop up yet. A lot of these signs you guys might honestly think are just in your head, but they're actually true. So food noise is one of the biggest signs that you are undereating. And most people just assume that food noise is you. You're like, I just don't have discipline. I'm just always thinking about food. I've got to stop this pattern. When we have to understand that your body, your hormones are chemical messengers, and they are constantly sending signals between your brain and your body to do things. So when you're getting a lot of that food noise, that could be a sign that you are undereating. Okay. But some other signs that you might recognize are things like fatigue. Maybe you're having poor recovery. Maybe you're having a lot of mood changes, anxiety, depression, feeling like you're overwhelmed very easily. Digestive issues are one of the biggest signs that you are undereating, between constipation and diarrhea, or feeling really bloated all the time, or not being able to process foods. Another big one is cycle changes. If you're noticing that your period's not as regular, okay? These are all signs that you are undereating. But so are things like having a really hard time losing weight despite dieting, okay? You're in a calorie deficit, quote unquote calorie deficit, and it just doesn't seem to be working. Mentally, like I mentioned, the food noise things, but you're just always thinking about food. Okay, I know I already mentioned that. Other things are sleep. Maybe your sleep is starting to get impacted. Maybe you're finding yourself waking up frequently throughout the night, or you're waking up and you feel like you can't stop thinking. Those are signs that you are not getting enough food. So all of these things are just little subtle signs that your body might not be getting enough food. And what typically happens is you think you need more discipline, you need to train more, you're focusing on all of the things besides just eating more. Why is it so unnatural for us to think that the one thing that gives us energy is what we don't need? Because we are all living in a world of less is more with food. Stop eating these foods, eat less calories, stop doing this. Like, it's all about removal rather than understanding that, like, your body is likely just trying to whisper at you right now that it needs more food before it starts to scream. And the screaming normally happens with you're burned out, you're tired, you're quote unquote off the diet wagon, and you just feel like crap all the time, right? So that's really important. Now, I want to talk about another case of undereating that often goes underlooked or unseen, I should say. I'm having a hard time talking today. I don't know if it's because I got a good night's sleep. Can you guys relate to just a little side tangent of like you are so used to being underslept that when you actually get good sleep, you feel like, wow, if it kind of feels euphoric. That's how I feel right now. So I feel like things are moving a little slower than they usually do. I don't know that I like it a lot, but I know that my body needs it. Talking about being undernourished, my body has definitely been underslept. But I want to talk about another case right now, getting back on topic of what it looks like to be overfed and undernourished. And this is likely the majority of people, okay? Because maybe you have extra body fat and you're trying. So why do most people try and restrict their calories or change their food? Because they're carrying extra weight. They're like, I'm carrying this extra weight and I want to get leaner. I need to lose body fat. And your solution is I need to eat less, right? Most people that are in this situation don't realize that they are overfed and undernourished. You're focusing so much on restriction and eating less, but you're not focusing on what you're missing from your diet. And this happens because of the modern diets and convenience often do provide enough calories. You just don't know you're taking them in. And there's very few nutrients. So for instance, oh gosh, let me get on a tangent here. Starbucks just just released their new protein coffees, right? It's literally a sugary drink with a scoop of protein powder in there. But people that are out there trying to make healthier food decisions, trying to get their protein in, are going to go through the drive-thru at Starbucks and be like, boom, I'm doing better now because I'm getting protein in my coffee. Well, you're still getting the 300 or 400 calories worth of nothing but sugar, right? So this is what I mean by being overfed and undernourished. They're getting 300 or 400 calories from nothing but sugar when those calories could have been coming from more nutrient dense sources like fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, the things that help your body perform better in life, not just in the gym. I'm talking about normal function. Okay, we need micronutrients, just not macronutrients. So also, but protein is another one. A lot of people are getting enough calories. Most of the time, what most people are getting too many calories from is fats, because a lot of the ultra processed foods that people rely on are fortified with a lot of fats because that's what helps keep their flavor. So oftentimes you might think you're under eating, but you're overeating. Sorry, you might think that you're not eating enough to lose weight, but you're just underfed. And you're undernourished, I should say. You're not underfed. You're overfed and you're undernourished. And this is a huge problem. And it's why you get a lot of cravings. It's why your energy doesn't feel good and why you're constantly struggling. Okay. So this is also why it's very important not to look at your diet from a macronutrient perspective or even a calorie perspective. We have to be looking at the quality of your food and the balance of your meals. Okay. So undereating isn't just calories, right? It's okay. If I get cravings every day between 3 and 4, and I look back at lunch and all I'm having at lunch is chicken and vegetables, like that's undereating, okay? And that's why you're getting cravings. If you simply just include some fats and carbs at that lunch, now you're eating a more balanced meal that's going to make you feel better and you're not going to have the craving at 3 or 4. This is what I mean by undereating isn't just subjective to calories, okay? Another thing that I really want to talk about today, and the very important thing, is the mental side of all of this, okay? And there's two things of it. The negative impact that undereating is having on your brain and how your brain is impacting your ability to eat enough. It's like two sides of this, okay? So diet culture and chronic restriction has really shaped disordered eating behaviors. I'm not saying eating disorder, two very different things. One is a coping mechanism. One is just not a normal way to eat in order to fuel your body. Your relationship with food has shifted based on what you believe. And that doesn't mean that you're using food as a coping mechanism or restricting yourself as a coping mechanism. It's just that you are now essentially in a state of like thinking that these types of behaviors are normal when they're not. Okay. So like making sure that we normalize things. but we have to remove the diet baggage. The other side of things is the emotional side, the guilt around eating certain foods, the fear of eating more, and identity being tied to being so disciplined, right? So these are three big things. Like, so for people that are, like they're so dialed in, they're gym goers, they're always 100% all in. When they allow themselves to have something that's like not part of their routine, they feel like they didn't have the discipline. We don't need to be practicing discipline with food, right? It should be a matter of like understanding how to nourish our body and have some flexibility. There should be no guilt around eating certain foods. There should be no fear around eating more. It's understanding how to eat enough for your body. And this is where we have to go into the mental side of things, because under eating and following a lot of this diet culture is impacting how you show up in your day, because now you're constantly consumed by these thoughts about food, and it's making the food noise even more, going back to one of the sides of things. And it can just reinforce these behaviors and these beliefs. So I know that a lot of people think that fixing their relationship with food and all of that stuff isn't something that they can do while working towards their goals, but they actually have to go hand in hand. And one of the biggest things that you have to understand is learning how to eat enough is the right way to approach any goal, whether it is fat loss, performance, optimization. It's not always eating less, it's eating the right amounts. Let's talk about consistency, okay? And this is when I'm going to go into the real talk about under eating. I've already kind of mentioned this, but under eating isn't subjective to just like maybe restricting yourself 1 or 2 days, going through those diet cycles. It's just, like I said, it's also on a daily basis. In fact, something I wrote down before coming on here to talk about on my Instagram today is the fact that the people that actually are at a healthy body weight, healthy body fat percentage, are feeling really good in their workouts, they're showing up in their life with presence, they just feel really good and in control. They are more about making sure that they're getting enough food. They are always thinking about having food available to them. They are never trying to eat less. They're always thinking ahead to making sure they have enough. When they go on trips and vacations, they're like, okay, where am I getting breakfast? What am I going to need to bring? Where am I getting lunch? They want to know. They want to have a plan to make sure that they are eating enough food. It's never about restriction. It's always about getting enough. And you being consistent on a daily basis with your nutrition, not just looking at calories, but your meals and the structure of your meals and the timing of your meals, is so important for you for energy balance, but also for things like blood sugar regulation and getting your body feeling like it's getting what it needs to be able to give you what you want. So if you're constantly feeding your body enough nutrients, your body is going to respond in a better way. In fact, by simply just eating on a more consistent schedule, eating enough food, you are going to likely be burning more calories in your day, and also just from the digestion of that food. The goal really is to get yourself into normalized eating patterns. When we talk about manipulating calories, that should be with as least restriction as possible. And it's why whenever I start working with a client, I always make sure that we are looking at finding calorie ceiling or having a good understanding of where that person's calorie ceiling is if they haven't been in a diet phase for a long time, to know that we want to work with as many calories as possible to give them as least restriction as possible. However, it comes down to consistency and food quality as well. Those things have to be covered to ensure that when we are applying calories, it's not just a calorie calculation game. It's I'm getting enough nutrients and I'm just maybe manipulating things a little bit to dial in the calories. Okay. So I want to offer you guys a few tips today, because I think that the main thing that I'm trying to get after here is that a lot of you guys might think that you need to be eating less, and a lot of you guys are underfed, undernourished, and maybe overfed and undernourished. So I want to give you guys some practical tips that are going to help you if you feel like all of this is resonating with you, like you're under eating and maybe you feel a little bit scared of eating more. Sipping on my coffee. Delicious. Okay. Now, this is something that is controversial, because I don't want you to think that there's anything magical about this first tip. It is mostly from a basic allowing you to feel your best and allowing your body to feel safe that it's getting enough nutrients so you won't overeat later. This is literally an optimization thing to keep appetite and energy regulated. There is no magic of metabolism here, but it is to make sure that you are taking in food every 3 to 4 hours. Okay. Every 3 to 4 hours of your day, you should be eating something. You should wake up, you should have breakfast, a balanced breakfast with some protein and carbs, maybe a little bit of fat, some veggies or fruit. Okay. And then a few hours later, you should have a snack or another meal. And then a few hours later, you should have lunch. And then a few hours later, depending on your schedule, you should have dinner or another snack. And then a few hours later, you should have dinner. So ideally, most people are probably eating 4 to 5 times a day. Some people 6 or 7 times a day, depending on how long they are awake for. Okay. That's going to be the best way to keep your energy levels regulated and to ensure that your appetite is regulated and that you're getting enough nutrients. Also making sure that your body is able to break down those nutrients a little bit better. So if you deal with a lot of digestive issues, okay, just breaking down your food into smaller meals can sometimes help that. All right. So that's going to be the best way for you guys to be on track with optimizing to make sure that you're getting enough. Now, there are some things that I might do if I am in a calorie deficit, because obviously being in a calorie deficit, you are looking at being slightly underfed. And that's where you have to know your personality and how you work best. And some people, that might look like spacing out certain areas of their day. In fact, where your workout lays is usually a gap where you can say, okay, I normally eat here, but I'm going to work out here instead. And for some people, that's first thing in the morning. I do think you should still have a pre-workout snack. But just learning how to be a little bit smarter about spacing out your food is what you want to be doing in a calorie deficit. Or what I typically do is eat at the same times in a calorie deficit, but I might lower calories in those meals. So like, let's just say, for instance, when I'm not in a calorie deficit, maybe breakfast is eggs, toast, avocado, and I don't know, fruit. And maybe in a calorie deficit, I'm using egg whites and low-fat cheese, and I'm skipping the avocado, right? I'm still having a meal. I've just lowered the calorie contents of it. And maybe a snack for you when you're not in a deficit might have been a protein bar and an apple. And that could easily be 400 calories. So in a calorie deficit, maybe I'm doing yogurt and an apple, right? I'm still having nutrients, but I'm just lowering the calorie contents of things. So, and I think that the next tip here is that if you are somebody that is concerned that you might be under eating, it's actually taking some time to know what your body needs to feel its best. It's how many calories do I need to be optimized right now to feel my best? And just by doing that, you might be surprised to find that your weight starts to go down naturally. In fact, I've had this happen recently with a couple of clients who started with me. I haven't really had to drop their calories. I've literally kept them pretty close to maintenance calories, and we are seeing a steady ticking down because they were overeating beforehand. And now that they're just eating about at maintenance on a consistent basis, they are losing weight. They are breaking that restriction binge cycle. And that's helping them regulate things. So don't always think that you have to be, eating at 13 or 1400 calories to see results. In fact, that's usually what's making it hard for you. Okay. So I know that under eating is something that most people don't expect, or maybe you think that's what's going on, but you're afraid of beating it. But if you truly want to have better control over your body composition, if you truly want to have a better relationship with food, if you truly want to feel better in your day, if you truly want to help making sure that your hormones are optimized, making sure that your workouts are productive, you need to make sure that you are eating enough and eating enough on a consistent basis. So we need to stop normalizing things like fasting, skipping meals, super restrictive diets, obsessive calorie and macro counting, and making sure that we're getting enough nutrients, focusing on a whole food diet, working in some flexibility, and learning how to diet on more, not always in a restrictive way. So if any of this sounds like you and you're struggling, please feel free to reach out to me. This is one of my favorite things to work with clients on, because the wins that come are not just physical. They are mental. They're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe how much energy I have. I cannot believe that I actually can be eating this much food and feel good. I've been living in this constant state of restriction for so long. This feels so amazing to me. I can't thank you enough. Like, that's the stuff that I like hearing. So I'm going to pop over to comments and chats and see if anybody's got anything for me. Good morning, Holly. Good morning, 5 a.m. squat clubs. All foods are also less nutrient dense because our souls are dead. I missed what that comment was about, but that's hilarious. I see some people joining on here. Anybody have any other questions related to this, or does anybody suspect that they might be under eating? I can talk a little about my own struggles with this. In fact, maybe I should. Let me talk about my own struggles with this before I close up. And I'm not going to make this a long thing. A few years ago, I had shoulder surgery. And it was, I'm not going to go into the whole story, but I was like really wanting to like take that season and put some recovery work in, put some work in on growing some strength back. And, honestly wanted to come back and crush it. But I am such a creature of habit with my nutrition. I do eat very consistently. I am on top of my nutrition. And when I changed my training after surgery, because I was not able to do as much CrossFit, I was doing a little bit more aerobic training, a little bit more zone 2 work, a little bit more conditioning work. And I wasn't really changing my training or my nutrition much because my training volume hadn't really changed much. It was just what I was doing had changed. And a long story short, I put myself into a situation where I was in a slight calorie deficit for a long period of time. And the repercussions from that were horrible. And I will not go into further details other than telling you guys that I will talk about it, but I need to make a whole episode about it because I do have a lot of topics or a lot of thoughts on this topic. But I experienced severe insomnia. My hormones tanked, injuries, and I just felt like absolute dog shit. And I was blaming myself. And that's what happens when you're not monitoring your weight, because I honestly felt fine. And then when I recognized that I had lost some weight, and it was because I was just in a slight calorie deficit. And I'm telling you this not because I want you to be like, oh my God, that's the fear of under eating, but also to give you guys the reality of like, when you are eating enough, your body burns a lot. And that's what was happening. My body was just burning through stuff. So from being in a good state. So if you guys have questions about this topic, if you struggle with this, please feel free to shoot me a message. I know under eating is something that a lot of people struggle with. It's fear of eating too much. But your fear of eating too much is usually leading you to stay stuck because you end up eating more when you're not thinking about it, or you're not getting the results that you're looking for because your body has adapted. So I am here to help in any way that I can. If you guys have more questions on this topic, feel free to shoot me a message, and I'll talk to you all in the next episode.